And this is Lily Pierpont, who will be steering us through the evening.
Great. Thank you so much, Dale. And thank you so much for being here, all of you. Can everybody hear me okay? Back in the back, great. So this has been a long time in planning, and the fact that it's happening has got, I'm a little shell-shocked, so just bear with me while I get my bearings. It's so great to see so many people that I know and love in the audience. Thank you for bringing your curiosity and your willingness to participate in this really important discussion. And we're calling this Collaboration Lab because it's a laboratory, it's an experiment, and we don't know what's gonna happen. I don't have a whole lot of preset questions, but we're just going to explore what our options are in the face of the world that we're living in right now. And it's amazing to me because my marvelous panelists were just, you may have seen earlier, exchanging cards because they've never met each other, and yet they all represent something really important that's happening in our arts community here. So what I'm gonna do, let me first introduce myself. My name is Lily Pierpont. I have a nonprofit organization called ArtBridge, and my two fabulous assistants are right here in the front row. It couldn't be done without them. And ArtBridge, we're really interested in conversations, creative, courageous conversations that engage people with the arts. And as a result of that, I have created a podcast series called Art Storming, and I interview creatives. We're now in our first season. We have 36 episodes. We broke the 5,000 download threshold just recently, and we're being listened to all over the world. So Santa Fe has a mouthpiece out there in the universe. And tonight, I decided to bring all these panelists together because each of them really represents something major that's happening in a collaborative way in the community. And I'm gonna let them each introduce themselves. First, what my thought was to first go through and have you introduce your institution that you represent and what that does for the community. And then we're gonna do a second round, and I'm gonna have you explain the many hats that you wear. And so I'll start by saying, in addition to Art Storming and ArtBridge, I'm also on the board at CCA, and I also, during COVID, started something called the Santa Fe Arts Club, and some of you in the audience, show of hands, are a member of that we got started, and that was evidence that we need community. And during COVID, we were all going crazy, and I started this platform online, and we have over 3,000 members. So again, this is hopefully a continuation of that, meeting each other in public, in the community, and I'm gonna pass it over now to Pamela Kelly.
Hi, everybody. Again, thanks for coming. I am the Vice President of Licensing for the Museum of New Mexico Foundation. And probably a lot of you know the Museum of New Mexico Foundation because it's the private not-profit arm that supports our 5 state museums. What I do is make money for them. And 20 plus years ago, I started a unique entrepreneurial program for them where I forged design partnerships between manufacturers out in the world of home decor products, furniture, lighting, bedding, textiles, etc. And I bring them into the museum collections to find inspiration in our collections to develop products that are then sold out in the world, mostly in wholesale.
I love this.
And so my job is really to promote the Museum of New Mexico because all of the collections are marketed as Mohawk Carpets and the Museum of International Folk Art, or Hartman Forbes wall covering and the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. So it's a twofold venture. It's to promote the collections of the museum, to educate the world about the cultures represented in our museums, and to make money for the museums. So that's what I do. One of the things. I'll get to the other hats later.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robyne Robinson. It sounds like a TV name because it is a TV name. Actually, it's my real name, but I served about 25 years in media as a news anchor in the Twin Cities. We'll get into the past life, but my current position is as principal of 5x5 Public Art Consultants. What we do is we work with municipalities, federal agencies, and in communities to really brand an identity and to do what I consider emotional equity in a project. And everybody knows what that is when you talk about, oh, that's my church, that's my school, that's the bench that I sit on every day. You have a sense of space and a sense of belonging. That's emotional equity. And so that's what we do in all the projects that we work on. I work between here and the Twin Cities, and I worked on projects that really support community equity and social injustice. I've worked on about 3 projects now related to George Floyd in the community, and also working on a project that just won a Historic Preservation Award. So what we did was restore a 100-year-old building at Ground Zero at the riots after the George Floyd murder. So primarily what we do is work in order to get people to understand the value of communities, the history of communities, and try to make sure that people are engaged in their communities. We understand basically that combining art and combining communities helps communities heal, and it helps young people really find their own identities, their own voices, and actually have a better opinion about themselves in the world. So we work on multiple projects. I'll leave it at that because there's a lot more to go with it.
I sense a collaboration in our future. I'm Jamie Blosser, and I am the director and CEO of the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance. MADA is an emerging alliance of over 10 local nonprofit and educational organizations and institutions. We are basically looking at what the College of Santa Fe campus and Santa Fe University of Art and Design campus can be. So MADA is a project of the Santa Fe Art Institute, and it emerged from this gigantic challenge of a 64-acre empty campus in the geographic center of our community. And what we're really doing with the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance is looking at ways that collaboratively, collectively, we can sort of self-determine a future for organizations that are working within the arts and culture realm to build emotional equity together, to have a real center of arts and culture that doesn't necessarily manifest in Santa Fe as often as I think we would all like, and to really have it be community focused in that way. And so this is requiring a lot of partnerships. It's also requiring a lot of fundraising to renovate these empty buildings, but they're fantastic. So part of it is this creative placemaking, community placekeeping project. Part of it is really how do we come together to share resources and share space and collectively move the dial in our community. All of these organizations are doing amazing work already, but I think that we'll talk more about the challenges today. There always have been challenges in the nonprofit world, and right now it's feeling pretty extreme. So we're really seeing this as civic infrastructure. We're seeing this as a long-term way that our community can support the work that we're doing in arts and culture in our community by taking some of these spaces out of the marketplace, because just as housing is expensive here, so is commercial space. And we want all of these, we want arts and culture to thrive in a grassroots way in Santa Fe as well.
Okay, and then there was me. My name is Lisa Keating, and I'm the executive director of the Gallery Association. So I represent about 100 galleries and businesses here in Santa Fe that have mostly commercial entities that deal directly with selling art to the public. We also represent museums, but the bulk of our membership and it is a membership organization, are galleries, commercial galleries. And getting them to work together, you're talking about you have each your own institution. I have a whole bunch of separate institutions that I'm constantly trying to corral. They all, they say like corralling cats. But we've done some really exciting things as a group and for the community in terms of collaborating. Last year, you may have seen the collaboration that we did with the Kiwanis Club, where we got 4-foot effigies of Zozobra and placed them with artists, and then they were placed in separate places around town in the museums and in the galleries. And then there was a treasure map so you could find them. And then they all convened on the convention center at Art Santa Fe last year. This year at Art Santa Fe, we actually have an installation, and we'll be representing all of our galleries there. And I hope that you will take time to come by and see us next week. We open on Friday, and next Wednesday night, we'll be collaborating with IFAM at their community event, and you'll find us out there giving out art fans and things like that. So that's what we do.
Thank you, all of you. And as you can see, this just is the tip of the iceberg, because we have another 12 panelists after tonight, and there are members of the audience that are also holding really important positions and holding down the fort for us here in Santa Fe and the roles that they have. And I'm trying to see if I can call out anybody in particular, but you all have your different roles that you play, and what I want to presence is that all of these people are mid-career people who have gotten to this place by doing a lot of other things. I know every single person on this panel wears a multitude of hats. So this round, we're going to go through and we'll get to know these people a little bit better.
Well, probably the main hat I wear actually will come to fruition, not main hat, another hat. Next week, I'm putting on the 4th biannual design summit. So in 2015, I started hosting these design summits to invite the world to the museums so they could come to understand how special they were, and also to invite other manufacturers to collaborate with us. So the first one was about design, creativity, and ethics. And the second one was about material. It was called Material, I can't remember, Tech Trailblazers and Global Makers. I can't even remember. And the third one was about the transformative power of place, and how Santa Fe as a place has drawn so many people to it and changed their lives, and then they have embedded that, the Santa Fe experience into their artwork or their designs. And then this next week, it's called Dignify by Design. So we're looking at the idea of dignity and design, which we thought of it many years ago, but it seems very fitting now. And it's called Dignify because the other third hat I wear is my husband and I, during COVID, started a magazine called Dignify. And it was looking at the idea of dignity and what's required to ensure living a dignified existence. So it's a digital magazine, and we feature stories about artists moving design traditions forward, companies dedicating resources to help people without means, and philosophy, people, politics. So anyways, next week we're assembling 6 speakers from around the world who are in design and politics and sustainability and architecture to really discuss this topic. And then we've invited designers, manufacturers, again, this very large crowd of people to really, again, talk about this intersection that we're addressing here and that is so imperative at this time in our world and our ever-changing society. So that's a couple of the hats.
I'm going to steal a mic that I It's a long and winding road, and I'll try to take you down it very quickly. I come from an arts family in Chicago, but I also come from a political family in Chicago. So while I had an uncle who studied overseas in Madrid and then came back and became director of special events for Chicago Public Schools, a sister who worked in Hollywood and film, my mother's baby sister married into the Nation of Islam, and so her husband's best friend was Malcolm X. My parents, being in politics, grew up, I kind of grew up in the Daley regime, so there were a lot of young black people that were becoming very political. My parents were some of those folks. So we had Kermit Coleman and some of the Chicago 7 in our house during the time, during the 1968 Chicago Convention. It was always very exciting. Always was very exciting in our house. We had artists like Oscar Brown Jr. and Judy Pace that would come and perform. My mother's baby brother hung out with Earth, Wind, and Fire. So it was this combination of art and politics, which one are you going to do? My dad was kind of leaning toward politics. I wasn't really interested, but his older brother was recital pianist for Agnes DeMille. I was much more interested in that. So all that to say, it led me kind of down this winding road. I wound up in TV, which allowed me to kind of fulfill my father's dreams of being involved in politics while I was on the anchor desk and a reporter in the Twin Cities, but also leaned towards art. So I started an arts program, which became one of the largest arts programs in the Twin Cities. We had write-ups and everything from Variety to the BBC because we really learned the community. The Twin Cities, it's a very incestuous community. It's kind of a mafia, Norwegian mafia. If you get in with the Norwegian mafia, you get in good. And so everybody has a 6 degrees separation to somebody that is in the music industry. You can have somebody that is chairman of a bank, but on the weekends, he's hanging out with the guys that he was in the garage band with, but those guys just happen to be the guys from Soul Asylum. So it was all this cross-pollination, and I saw it as a great opportunity to really learn the community. And it eventually wound up me becoming very close friends with Prince. And so we had this amazing opportunity to really become an arts powerhouse. And so our station made connections with all of the big houses, First Avenue, Hennepin Theater Trust. We made sure that when artists came to town, no matter what, they had to talk to our station first. So it was a little bit of art politics and real politics. After being on the air for 20 years, I wound up running for lieutenant governor of the state of Minnesota with a wonderful man by the name of Matt Antenza. We ran on a youth party and an arts platform, young adults in the hip-hop generation, which, of course, is now over 50 years old, hip-hop votes. So that was our focus on really getting the vote out and also getting the immigrant community out. If you know the Twin Cities, we have a very large East African community from which Ilhan Omar comes from. And so we really focused on those communities. We lost to Mark Dayton because his family owns Target, but that's okay. We really made an impression. And so after that, I wound up working, I was appointed as art director for Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. We started a program that is really one of the top arts airport programs in the country. We started the first art screening room. We were the first to have Cuban artists come in after Obama got rid of sanctions against Cuba. We started a weekly music program with all the top artists in the community and a large art program. Gail King wound up doing a story on the fact that we remodeled all 300 of our restrooms with all local artists, and they're absolutely beautiful. If you go through the Twin Cities and you see the restrooms, that's me. So I started my own company, fiveXfive, and during that time I also was chair of the Minnesota Museum of American Art, and also sat on the board of the Walker Art Center and also on MCAD, Minnesota College of Art and Design. So I was very well plugged into the Twin Cities. Decided to come here on a vacation because my family abandoned me one holiday, and I never left. And so while I've had a home here for almost 20 years, I really started living here 5 years ago and trying very hard to become very plugged into this community and do some of the things that I do. So currently I serve as art commissioner for the Santa Fe Arts Commission, and I work in public art for the city of Albuquerque. And that is a very short history.
And we are so lucky to have both of you so far. Jamie?
Well, my educational background is a mixture of engineering and architecture and art. And I have very, very stubbornly refused to stay within one specific discipline. And so I did start out practicing architecture. I practiced architecture for 20 years. And really, my passion is housing and working with communities that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford an architect. So I have this amazing national network of people who consider ourselves public interest designers or community-based designers. And I also started a nonprofit called the Sustainable Native Communities Collaborative. And that was really to bring sort of pre-development grant writing and development services to tribal communities all over the country, really with a focus on housing. And I also sort of stepped into development when I worked for the Okewinge Housing Authority. So really have stayed connected to those groups, even though my last few years, I was the executive director at the Santa Fe Art Institute for 9 years. I can't believe it was 9 years. And so really that thread through for me was that that artists and designers and architects and creative practitioners of all disciplines, you know, there's so many more opportunities now than ever to really move past different genres, different disciplines. And my role at the Art Institute was really to support that and to welcome artists, residents from all over the world and locally to participate within their own genre, but learn collaboratively with other artists and creative practitioners and culture bearers. And to really do so through the lens of social justice. And the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance really grew from that practice as executive director of the Art Institute when the campus closed in 2018. But a funny sort of circular thing because it's a small town and also my life just tends to sort of come back around to different things. I was actually the intern architect in the late 90s, right after I had moved here for the Ricardo Legorreta buildings that became the Visual Arts Center and the Santa Fe Art Institute. And so I know where all the skeletons are buried and know a little too much, but the beautiful thing now with the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance is that I get to step in with all these very strange, not linear trajectories of my own career in a way that probably very few people could in terms of celebrating the arts, all of the disciplines, but also the cultural aspects that Santa Fe and northern New Mexico bring, as well as the architectural and the development aspects. It is also a real estate project. And so I'm just over the moon that there's something out there that I can actually do to bring all of this together. And it's a real joy to step in with the herding of the cats to do that.
Wow. So I'm not sure how to talk about this, but I think I'll start here. I came up through the entertainment business, and I'm a native Californian. And so I moved here in 2015. I had an online magazine for 10 years in California that was about the California lifestyle. I lived in Los Angeles, and a very, very common thing that Angelinos would bond over was how much they hated Los Angeles. And I thought, I'm choosing to live here. I wasn't sentenced to a life in Encino or whatever. So I should think of things that I like about it, right? I mean, I'm here, I should enjoy that. And so being raised to really kind of be an ambassador, it was impressed on me as a young person that wherever I went, I was representing where I came from. I was representing my family. I got sent to Japan on an exchange program when I was young, and they were really trying to put the fear of God in me so I would behave over there. But they wanted me to know that I would be representing my family, my city, my state, my country, and everything that I did on that trip would reflect back on those entities. So that kind of is has been a natural growth path for me through entertainment. I ended up in small projects that desperately needed representation, that needed marketing. I produced a show right out of college, and there was no marketing budget. There was zero. And I was like, okay, well, we'll just get an ad in the LA Times, and then everyone will come. And I found out that the ad in the LA Times was going to cost the entire budget of the whole production. So I was like, oh. So I've learned kind of the hard way, or the very intimate way, how to make things work and how to represent what we offer. And it's something that I just love about what I get to do for Santa Fe, which is just represent Santa Fe and all that we have to offer. And it's daunting how rich we are here. and I sing jazz.
Well, and I will also say that I know that you've also assisted other artists to put their
Oh, yes. So-
artwork into production.
Yes, so, and I curate the art at the airport. And we did something at the Gallery Association, which was something that I identified in the entertainment business. It was really hard to get from being talent, whatever that talent was, to the people who give you the job, who place you, who need what you offer. And there was a whole bank of gatekeepers that were in between that, and that sort of were there to facilitate the process, but also clogged the works a little bit. So what we have created at the Gallery Association, in an effort to represent as many artists as possible in the galleries that are here, is an artist portal. And it allows artists from anywhere in the world, as long as you can apply in English, you need a computer, and you need to be able to write in English, because we can only read in English at this time. You can submit digitally, and then your work gets juried. It costs $10 per image. You must submit 3 images, but no more than 10. Sweet spot is probably 3 to 5. And they look at, are you a working artist? Are you ready to make, it's like Match.com for artists and gallerists. And so then, if you're juried in, you go into this catalog, which all of our galleries use as a resource to find new artists when they're looking, as opposed to going through the process of walking into a gallery and saying, gee, I do something like that, and I think I should be in your gallery, which is lovely, but not very effective. Maybe that works 0.5% of the time. But going through this process, which is really, I mean, I'm so proud of the art that's in that catalog. And it's not available to the public, it's only for our gallerists.
Yeah, that's so great. And so all of you contribute in such very different ways, and yet there's this interconnected thread of social justice issues intertwined. And I think one of the things that I find fascinating is that the arts are not simply a way for us to be entertained. They are the soul of our community, and they are actually an access point to ways to bring our community together and to bring the people who are at risk together with the people who are super privileged and helping support the arts. And I think that that's sort of the next way forward, is figuring out even better ways to do that. So how have you all, how did you come to these ways of collaborating that you currently represent with your organizations? How did those evolve?
For me, it really was the benefit of working in places that were kind of also ran in TV. And trying to help you understand, I worked at a TV station that not all TV stations have an affiliation or an owned and operated relationship with a network. A lot of times, new stations that are starting out, they are independents. And so the station that I worked at was originally an ABC station in Minneapolis, became an independent. They lost their affiliation. And so a lot of the things we did were because the station was owned by a family, back when people could actually afford to own TV stations. And so God bless Stu Schwartz, he didn't like spending money. And so everything that we did was on a shoestring budget, from the sets and lighting, everything. And so you learn to get this Andy Rooney, or Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland, hey kids, let's put on a show kind of attitude. You've got a truck, and you've got lights, and you've got this, and we would come together and collaborate on projects. I'm the main anchor. I'm excited. I'm the first black woman to anchor in the Twin Cities. And I'm working at a station where they say, we want you to do a talk show, but we're not giving you a set. And it's not going to have a theme song because we can't afford that. And, you're just making it up, as you're going along. And I'm looking at them, and it's like, I've got these huge ideas in my head. I want to be Oprah, So, I refuse to be daunted by that. And so I took the furniture out of my house, And the guy who did the kiddie show had a van. I had him come to my house and pick up all my furniture. I had just started a good relationship with Prince's band, so I asked his music director, I said, I need a theme song, they won't pay for it. He goes, I'll write you one. I gave him $1,000 and he was done with it. And when we won the Emmy, that's when they gave me the money for a set and all that. But I had to learn how to make things happen out of nothing.
Well, I think that's thank you so much for that story, because one of the things that I think is important to underscore is that everybody in this room is a creative. Everybody in this room is a creative. And what we do as creatives is build stuff out of nothing. And I think that that's the spirit that we have to bring to this next situation that we're in, is how do we create from nothing? Not how did we do it before, have we always done it, but how do we really get together and create something completely new? So, Pamela, when you created your enterprises, where did that inspiration come from?
Well, it's interesting. I'm lucky to be a fourth generation Santa Fe, and my great grandfather was in the wholesale mercantile business, and so our family has always been involved in business in New Mexico, but also the arts, because my grandparents came to Santa Fe and they were part of that generation that said, well, let's make this town interesting. So they opened the museums, and my dad helped start the opera, and blah, blah, blah. So it was a really exciting kind of group to grow up with, because they were like, all right, well, let's make this town interesting. And it was all about arts and culture. But, you know, I used to work in product development in the Bay Area for a lot of the big retailers, Pottery Barn, Cost Plus, blah, blah, blah. And I was home one weekend, and I was I call it the Fine Arts Museum still, the New Mexico Museum of Art, and there was a Bauman exhibit up, and I just thought, oh my God, these museums are a gold mine of inspiration for product development. I should start a business. Anyways, long story short, it took a couple years to get the whole thing organized, because as you know, our museums are state museums, so the Attorney General had to agree about this crazy entrepreneurial collaboration. And I'll never forget, I went to the High Point, North Carolina, which is where the big furniture show is. And I had so much passion for this place we live and that I grew up in. And you all live here, and so you know why it's special. But to grow up in a place where as a white person you're a minority, and you never knew that you were a minority until you went someplace else and nobody else this color was a minority, and you grew up going to, you know, the animal dance at San Ildefonso or the posadas at a little teeny village outside of Las Vegas. I mean, it was all this stuff that we just did. But it's that really unusual sort of mixing and merging of all those experiences in Santa Fe, whether it starts with the natives and then the Spanish Empire and then the railroad. And so this design aesthetic that emerged from here is so rooted in history and culture and people and place and architecture. It's very real. So I go marching off to North Carolina, and I didn't really know what licensing was. I'd read some books, I talked to some friends, and so I, end up in this place. I don't even know how to navigate it. It's as big as, I don't know, all of downtown Santa Fe. And because I had this unbelievable passion for what our museums had and what our story was, I convinced in that one trip 3 of the top manufacturers of furniture and textiles and rugs to partner with us. And I came back, I was like, okay, let's get going. And I've been doing it for 25 years. I mean, I've done fashion, I went to Paris, and I'd met the head of, I met Maria Grazia Chiuri, who was just resigned from Dior. I met Dries Van Noten. I met all these people because I said, we've got this amazing material in our collections, and you really should partner with us because we have the best there is, and it's such an unusual place. And they all went, oh, okay. So much of it has to do with gumption, passion, and not ever seeing a block with what you're going to do, because it's amazing what, I mean, I sent a FedEx to the president of Tiffany, and I said, you know, you really should collaborate with us, because in 1923, Tiffany was the largest purchaser of turquoise at the turquoise mines in Cerrillos, and we did this huge collaboration in 1923 at the Paris Exposition. So let's do a new one. And they said, okay. So anyways, I think maybe it has to do with being young and foolish, or it has to do with coming from this unbelievably unusual place and finding connections, because it's all about finding connections and creating excitement and building community. So
It's also being on fire and having this passion that you have to share. I mean, that's how collaborations go. I mean, telling people you should partner with us. Now, sometimes it doesn't work because your idea of should, going back to the artist walking into the gallery and saying, well, you should have my work in here. It's a slippery slope. But sometimes you're really right. And Tiffany knows it, and you're unstoppable. So, good. Well done.
Thank you. I also believe that there's something about having a Cliff Clavin moment. And what does that mean? Working at the airport, we had 7 minutes to capture imagination and to educate as people go from gate to gate. And that's 30,000 people a day. You get 7 minutes to capture their attention. And so we used our 6,000 square foot concourse art gallery to teach. My whole thing was to give them something visual, include artists, but educate them at the same time. So by the time they either get from gate A to gate B, or they get from the terminal into a car, they can turn to somebody and go, did you know this about, you know, and give some little nugget, which means that they will come back again. And this time they might stop at a gallery. So educate them, entice them, make them come back for more.
Plant the seed.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what everyone is saying is being able to see opportunity where there's a challenge. And yes, naivete can go a long way when you don't know what you're exactly getting into or how hard it might be to accomplish. I think that, you know, my architectural education, for instance, architects are not always the greatest collaborators. We are often taught that, you know, if you're not in the studio all the time, you're never going to be that master genius architect. And so it was a real challenge to choose a path that was much more community-based and much more collaborative. You know, we would always sort of talk amongst ourselves, like, are we really architects if we're not doing that one path that we're taught to do? And I think that it is about that passion and sort of, well, that's not my path, and being able to accept it. I was lucky to really be exposed to that early, right? And so I could sort of navigate this pretty different trajectory for myself. And I think I take that ethos that I learned as an architect again into the work that we've been doing. When the campus closed, there wasn't a lot of sort of community feedback yet about what it could be, what it should be, what the community needs it to be. And so a group of us got together, and there were originally 5 nonprofit organizations. It was the Art Institute, Chainbreaker, Earth Care, YouthWorks, and Little Globe. And we got together and started talking about what does equitable development mean for Midtown, the Midtown campus in Santa Fe. And it was a pretty interesting conversation because these are all very different organizations with very different missions, and yet we all had this kernel of revitalization on that campus needs to honor the history but reflect where we are as a community right now, and it really needs to be that community-centered space in the heart, you know, the new geographic heart center of Santa Fe. And so we actually started working together with the UNM Design and Planning Assistance Center on a consensus basis, which was terrifying. Because I thought, how does that even happen? How does consensus work when you're different, you have different agendas. We were all very transparent about our different agendas, which helps, by the way. And then, what we agreed is that it's fine to disagree, it's great to disagree, but bring something constructive to the conversation. And we did an amazing project together. We engaged, mostly really in terms of constituents, thanks to, grassroots folks like Earth Care and Chainbreaker. But the Art Institute, at the time I applied for a grant from the NEA, an Our Town grant, that could help fund a large block party. And so this was like 2021, we were all starved for human connection. And we had an outdoor block party at the Midtown campus, which I think for us sort of manifested what this could be for one day, the vibrancy that it could have again. And we ended up getting so much participation from youth, Spanish speakers, low-income households, and we provided recommendations to the city that they then actually turned into their community development plan. And so I think that this sort of, don't know quite maybe what you're getting into, but you have this need and you see this opportunity where other people might see a challenge, is sort of the seedlings that we need to honor as creative people, as humans, as collaborators, because we all have that potential, right, to do more with more people. And I'll just pause for a second, because I think that in the art world, and this is really important to me, I think that in the art world, there is a sense of what art is, with a capital A, and that community-based art may not be that capital A. And so I think that it's been my lifelong passion, in whatever discipline I'm working in and whatever support I'm giving to creative practices and creative practitioners of all disciplines, that we all really sit back and recognize what it takes for a project to get to a gallery, for a project to get to a performance, for a project to get in a show. And it takes that honoring of process that as a community, I hope that we understand that people need space for that, people need funding just to jump into process, and they need time to do that. And that's what I hope that we're growing through the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance, because it's not always something that people see, and it's certainly, and I think a lot of talk is not always honored. We think about community-based art a little differently, just like I think the fine arts and crafts can be thought of differently. Well, we all know in New Mexico the importance and the elevation and celebration of craft.
Yeah, the fact that this conversation is so community-based does really underscore the difference between that capital A and that low A. And I think that going forward, we really just need to think of art as integral to our whole community and not just something that we do for entertainment purposes. And so I'm just trying to think where to go with this. Since all of you have had the experience of collaborating, doing what you're doing, what do you see in a current situation as being the biggest obstacle to your goals?
Trust.
Trust?
Trust. And I see it not only as a consultant, but also in my work with public art in Albuquerque. And I think it's because people don't understand the process, and it's because they feel somewhat isolated from the process. Any project that I've worked on where we need to work with the community, we try to get the word out, we try to put it in the paper, we try to put it on a public transportation line so people can have public transportation to get there. We try to make sure that there's a babysitter or somebody who can watch children, or that we do it at a community center so their kids can play basketball, or we can provide food and drink to get people there. But people don't have a lot of time. When they come, they need to know how they fit into the process. They're afraid oftentimes that being on a committee or being on a board, they have to pay money that they don't think that they have. And then they start to resent the fact that there's some old white person that's on the board that is telling them how to do things in their community. We've got to find ways to have people understand that they are needed, that they have a purpose, that they have a voice, that what they can contribute is important. If you can't sit on a board, how can you help as a volunteer? How can you barter what you have as goods to help in the community. I think we need to find new ways to engage people to either be part of selection committees or boards, or find new ways of getting into the community to get people involved. Because when people see something that the project's happening in their community, they don't know anybody that was on that committee, they don't know anybody that's on the board, they don't trust it. You know, and we're in a new era ever since COVID, ever since George Floyd, ever since people are starting to stand up and demand representation on administrative boards or in museum boards or any kind of project that's going on in their community. They want representation. So we've got to either learn new ways or teach people how they can be involved.
Well, how can we use the communication systems that we have, the infrastructure that we have, to let people know about what does exist? Because you've all just met each other, which is mind-blowing to me, given that we all are living in the same community, in the same circles. And so how do we do a better job of getting the word out? I mean, a forum like this, one of the reasons that I wanted all of you to be here is so that all of you could see what all of you are up to. And I'm not sure that everybody here does have a sense of how many things there are happening, and maybe you don't feel empowered to engage in different ways, or maybe you're already taxed and maxed out in terms of how you can engage. But I think that it's a collective thing because we want to keep this going. So what are some other...
I have a thought. It kind of circles back to what you were saying about, you know, respecting the process and understanding that there's a process. There's, you know, these things... There's a gestational period to art, whatever it is, whether it's a song or a building or a festival. And a lot of times, I think what we're finding is that we just get it the day before, you know, like I posted on Facebook this morning that I was going to be here. I posted on Facebook for our Gallery Association people a few days ago. But very last minute, you know, part of that is underfunding and being understaffed. But when you're on the receiving end of that, it makes it hard to engage when you're just like, it's like popcorn. It's happening, this kernel is popping now, as opposed to being able to get in there and be part of the whole process, and then you're going to have more buy-in. And I think we need to not sit on boards. I think boards need to run, you know? So maybe we can start to language that in a way that's appealing. I went to I know I'm jumping around, but I have a lot of popcorn thoughts happening. And I was at a seminar earlier today, and the reason that I was there was because that woman who was facilitating that event spoke to me. What she put out into the world resonated so deeply with me that I could not go there. And I think that there's a lesson there, that as we begin gestational periods, for us to share in intimate language that calls those people forward. Because we're all humans are creative. So
I think you're absolutely right, and I'm going to stop because you have something to say. But
Thank you.
we have to find new ways of meeting people where they are. And some of the things that I learned in working in public art, working with great architects, because I'm a girl fan of architects, but you have to meet people where they live. So that means you have to go to a Hmong sewing circle. You have to go to a black church potluck. You have to drive out to the Pueblo because they don't have the means for internet and all that. But you still have to keep in mind there's another generation becoming behind us, so we have to reach out on the TikTok. We have to reach out on the other multiple different formats that are out there right now to reach younger and younger audiences because they're much more savvy than we were, and they're looking at multiple things, but they don't know how to verbalize and engage and come out. So we have to learn different ways. Does that mean what we're doing at a museum or a gallery stays there? No, that means there's a coffee house right across the street. We do it at the coffee house because people feel a little bit more comfortable there.
Yeah.
Agreed, and I think a few things popcorny as well. I think one way, right, to build trust is to really interrogate the systems that we're all in and to make sure that structurally we are making changes that help to build trust. For instance, compensating. For instance, providing community stipends, right? Meeting people, of course, where they are, and just kind of looking at, kind of doing an audit, right, of all of the things that might be creating a barrier for access or participation, robust participation from the folks that we really want more participation from. And also, you know, one of the kind of projects of a lifetime that I did at Okewinge was help the Pueblo to rehabilitate their historic core, their historic Pueblo. And we had to do that necessarily with a lot of different pieces of the community, with elders and cultural leaders. But we actually started the project with youth. And what I learned is if you can do a really meaningful project, bringing youth in, it does so many things. It brings the parents in, but it helps them understand their role in society, in their community. They did such an amazing project as we asked them to, we taught them how to learn GIS and how to map the Pueblo. And they did such an amazing job that they came back for 5 years. Some of them either went to college or became apprentice in different like electrical or plumbing trades. All of them had that kind of future because the Pueblo governor was also at the National American Indian Congress and brought them to Sacramento to talk about their work. So you think they had some pride in the community, right? So that is, I think that kind of thing can really grow and build on it. One recent thing that I felt was really a successful beginning, and I hope it continues, is this Creative Hub. I don't know if any of you sort of were part of the Creative Hub conversations recently, funded by the City of Santa Fe Arts and Culture and started by Creative Startups and Vital Spaces, about bringing together this very disparate group of folks involved in arts and culture in Santa Fe, just for a few online conversations. But even though it was online and only a few very brief conversations, it was clear that those of us who are in the design fields or the visual arts or the performing arts aren't connecting. And you know, I think that in Santa Fe we've talked about having a shared calendar for years. Who wants to do that? But if something like the Creative Hub could continue as that, you know, because what we know is that no matter what discipline you're in, there's this similar conversations that need to be had, and we don't need to silo ourselves to start off with.
Exactly. So
can I-
that
can I-
collaboration, go ahead.
I just really say I also did what you did. In working on the project and restoring that 100-year-old building in Minneapolis that was heavily damaged, we needed to get that building open and rebuilt as quickly as possible without people feeling that interlopers were coming into the community and going to commercialize the community. And so what we did, we went to 3M and asked 3M for help because 3M had a product that was a vinyl that could go on the windows that were being installed. And to keep kids from vandalizing the windows, we wrapped the whole building, 85,000 square feet, in this 3M vinyl and asked artists and poets to write stories of inspiration and hope around the building. 3M was excited about it because they got to test their new product, and we had an arts element to it. And that building was never vandalized the whole time that they were doing reconstruction for an entire year. I'm very proud of that. But I did exactly what you were talking about, partnering with another outside agency that you could help them see the value in art to
Yeah,
collaborate.
I mean, I think in this moment that we are all now living where funding sources are gone, the way we all, I mean, this is what I say to my colleagues at the Museum of New Mexico Foundation who are running, you know, capital campaigns or trying to do development. You have to figure out how to create value for both partners. And in this,
100%.
again, now, I mean, if ever there was a moment where we needed to think about take an entrepreneurial approach to building community, to raising funding, whatever, it is about creating partnerships where there is a win-win for both people. And there are a lot of businesses and corporations who are so anxious to partner with social ventures because it's the right thing to do, and selfishly, it gives them great content for their marketing campaigns. But also part of that, I think, now Santa Fe, we are both blessed and burdened by how many nonprofits are here and how many nonprofits are knocking on the same doors for funds. Something you had said about when you were trying to get the radio station started, and what you just said about getting the youth involved. It seems to me that if instead of asking for money or asking people to join boards, asking them to come out for a community day to make something happen is more fun and interesting, and it builds community. And then someone goes, oh, well, I like being here with you. Can I do more? So it seems like giving everybody the opportunity, if you're not an artist, to be creative by helping move something forward, you embed trust and engagement, and maybe you'll get some money.
Well, that's the perfect conclusion to part one. We're going to take a short break now. Are we on? Okay. I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Judy Tuwaletstiwa. And Judy and I did a podcast together. She was kind enough to do one of my podcasts with me. So if you want to know more about Judy, you can go to that podcast. And I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you introduce it. This is a project that I got a little bit of a sneak preview on that's an intergenerational collaboration. And so we've been talking about collaborating amongst ourselves. This is another layer of collaboration, and Judy will say more about that. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Lily.
Okay.
I guess I speak into this. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Great. That was a wonderful panel. I learned a lot. And it helped me think about, suddenly I realized why I'm working the way I am right now in my studio. I'm working extremely abstractly with red, black, mainly red and black, some white. And I'm also working narratively, which will tie into what this is about. And I was thinking, why am I working at these two extremes right now? And it's because it's time to bring that all together. It's a time of connection, a time of a friend, Mark Holmes, who was the head animator on Ratatouille, said we need to have tentacles of connection now. And I thought it was such a powerful image. And I realized that in my studio, that's what I'm living out at the moment, connecting within myself at age 84, what I've worked for my entire life. And thank you. Somehow, as you were each speaking, it helped connect me to that. So I'll quickly give some background. I was very lucky. I grew up in LA when we didn't hate it. We loved it. I grew up in the poorest section of Los Angeles, East Los Angeles. My parents were communists during the McCarthy era, which was not a very smart thing to do, but they were ideologues. I learned a whole bunch about what happens when people believe something completely and what it does to their vision. They were really smart people, really special. And they had an ideology that they ascribed to. Luckily, in 1956, when the Russians invaded Hungary, they could no longer believe in that ideology, and they turned their eyes in other ways. But I grew up in a deeply ideological home. My dad would disappear for years at a time into hiding. The FBI would bang at our door to torment us. But I was very lucky. at one of my high school reunions, and we're still like this, one of my friends said, I asked them actually, I said, did you guys know my parents were communists? And my Mexican friends said, híjola, no, we didn't pay attention to that stuff. My Japanese friends, who had all been in the camps, said, we knew and we tried to protect you. Never said a word. And I realized how fortunate I grew up with friends who both knew and tried to protect, and to grow up so multiculturally. I went, and this influences my work, and you'll see even in what we're doing with the videos that I'll share. And I want to thank Melinda Frame for the videos. Stand up, Melinda, because you're a brilliant videographer. Melinda is not only the filmmaker, but she's also the editor. And you'll see what I'm talking about. So what I grew up with, rather than believing in the ideologies of different religions, were the songs. With my Mexican friends, I'd go to High Mass. Of course, it was in Latin, and it was magical. With my black friends, I'd go to little storefront churches, again, singing. With my Japanese friends, I'd go to the temples, and it was silence. Absolute, the song of silence. With my booby, with my grandma, I'd go to the Orthodox synagogue. And again, the singing. So what I took from all of it was the beauty of communication through song rather than ideology, which separates us so violently. I was fortunate enough to go to Berkeley as an undergrad. Berkeley was $70 a semester. Yes, anyone in California, all of us were the first kids in our families who got a 4-year degree. And then I got married. I got my masters and my misters, as they used to say, when I graduated. And we moved to Boston, where my then husband, Michael, had a job at Lincoln Labs, and I applied to Harvard and got into a great teaching program that paid for itself, 3-year full-time student teaching. Oh, that we only had these things today. And I think we do in different places. I had some great professors who truly opened me. At Harvard, my professor was kicked out before the semester ended, but I saw him years later when he was giving a talk as Ram Dass, not Richard Alpert. And I said, hey, you didn't make the final. He said, what could I do? They kicked me out. It was wonderful to learn how to teach from him. He was a great teacher. At Berkeley, Professor Alan Renoir, who had been a cameraman for his father, Jean, and had grown up in the house with his grandpa, Auguste. Magnificent teacher, medieval English literature. I had no idea I was a visual artist, none. Because in 7th grade, and there's so many bad experiences that have become so good in my life. I stayed up all night painting the way car lights seemed to cut into the asphalt when it rained in Los Angeles. And I took the painting in to my art teacher, Miss Rasmussen, and she said, you're no good at art. And that ended it. Gone. Closed down. But since my art has always come from deep in the unconscious, I think I would have been devastated trying to do art in the tumult of my home. When I was 29 years old, I saw a Van Gogh exhibit, and something opened in me. And I started to draw. By then, I had 3 little boys. I didn't have my girl yet. So it was pretty wild being an artist and raising 4 kids. But I'm very fortunate that I did. So family, community. The thing I did learn when that teacher told me I was no good at art was how to get involved with my community. I became student body president. I was at Girls State, and I learned how to work together with others in such a wonderful way. And I think if I had gone straight into where I would have gone as an artist, that would not have happened. I'm very, very fortunate. So, back to see, I was living in Northern California, and my life was kind of coming apart, and friends said, you need to go to the desert. You've always wanted to, you need to go to the desert and just be by yourself. My kids were mainly grown. So they loaded a tent in my car and other things, and off I came to the Southwest, 1984. That's where I met my present husband, Philip Tuwaletstiwa, at Chaco Canyon. We camped next to each other. I was setting up my tent, and I heard this wonderful laughter, and I said, whoever that is, I need to meet that person. And then we met.
And there's an anniversary coming up.
Actually, July 4th. So that Philip would never forget our wedding. Thank you, Lily. So we're going to be out on the res, actually, July 4th. We lived at the Hopi Reservation, on the Hopi Reservation, for about 12 years before moving to Galisteo. But when I took that trip in the desert, I had pulled out a showing. I had been showing for quite a few years, large-scale handmade paper with etching, with fiber, in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I rushed some work for a show. My back went out. I can't do this. So I pulled out. I thought, okay, I'll pull out a showing for a few years, and then I'll find a gallery again. Well, it was 15 years until I wanted to show. During that time, my work became narrative, partly because of the stories I felt underneath me as I slept on the earth here in the Southwest. The earth is a reservoir for the unconscious. I hadn't lived at Hopi yet. By the time I lived at Hopi, my palette reduced because of an experience with a Black Salvation Army Santa in New York City. In 1993, my palette reduced itself to black, red, and white. And it stayed like that for almost 20 years. But during this period, after the desert trip, light was so powerful. It was like the light in Los Angeles before smog. When I was 13, we were in the classroom, and we were all crying, and we couldn't figure out why our eyes hurt us so much. And then we found out there was something called smog. But before that, for 13 years, it was the exquisite desert light that we know here. And it was magical. So out of that, in 1990, I was living in Columbus, Ohio, with Philip, who was at the Center for Mapping there. And I'd never lived in the Southwest. I mean, I'm sorry, in the Midwest, or I guess it's called Appalachia. The sky is so heavy. It sits on your head and gray. It was like I'd never experienced that. And I started to feel like I was sleepwalking. And as a kid at my grandma's house, when I would get up at night to run to the bathroom, I'd go like this with my fingers to feel my way, because we didn't have night lights back then. So I did a series of paintings called Songs of the Night Sky, and a little frog appears in them. And that frog has taken quite a journey. And that's what the videos will help you understand. And it's become a deeply collaborative journey. So we'll play the first video. And Melinda, again, thank you for your brilliance.
Grandma, can you tell me a story? Froggy started out as a series of 5 paintings that Jima did who knows when. I'm bad with timelines. But she took those paintings into Photoshop for a Photoshop class she was doing and kind of tore them apart and warped them and put them together in different ways to create these sort of cave paintings that she started weaving into this story. And the story was this hypnotic sort of dreamscape that she imagined was a children's book.
That was the first depiction of whale.
There's a whale.
And this was about time.
First person.
Different. And then that's the same.
Ugh.
That stayed.
You made it even better though.
That stayed. At some point I realized that this was a myth for our times, a fairy tale for our times. And the fairy tales that we need are healing for this period.
We're in this time where we're waking up. We've been shown that everything that we hold dear has some evil side to it that discounts it. We're so lost right now around truth. And in those times, I think you just have to keep pointing at things that you know are true. And Froggy is just absolutely one of those things.
That's great.
Yep, love that.
That's powerful.
It comes from an innocent, honest relationship between a grandmother and a grandson, 2 different generations, and is a reflection of something deeply human. Yeah. And then, hello, you say, I'm Frog. I know you, dear Frog. I've waited so long I forgot I was waiting. You're the frog I've waited for. I need you to journey to a faraway place that is always near. Death lives there. Take my heart, it holds all dreams and stories. I've waited so long.
The book is about story. It's about death and how we create story to deal with death. It's about the ancestors. It's about friendship. It's about love. It's about finding your own heart song. And these are all things in life that we need. It's such an amazing book to be working on all these years, and now to be able to work on it with Caleb. It's just magical.
You kind of couldn't ask for a more open, honest, loving, creative partnership than what Jima and I have. Everyone always says I have such long fingers.
You do.
If we line them up. It's either on a weekend or I was homesick from work, but I was in my front room and she called me. She just told me that she'd gone in for a scan and that it was ovarian cancer. And there's definitely like a blackness in my memory there. I just remember being unable to speak and just being on the phone.
I wasn't scared. I just didn't feel I was ready to die. And I want to use this time as best I can. And maybe this book in part comes out of that, is being able to realize that the stories that we tell, those are the threads that keep things alive. Yeah, she was a dancer and a choreographer.
Yeah, I have heard about her.
Yeah. That's about as close as we can get to giving death a heart.
I think that's such a powerful image, and I want that to be like the core story, is that Froggy loses someone he loves, and then he realizes that the only thing he can do for her now is to tell stories about her. Frog remembered his dear friend Lizard. He remembered all the stories we have forgotten to tell about the loved ones we have lost.
We are all storytellers. And I think about Frog's journey and my journey, having to face death. At this point, family, story, is so interwoven. It is a single fabric.
Grandma, I wish I could tell stories like you.
You'll have your stories. And some of them will even be about your grandma who loves you so much. What's so wonderful is in the actual book, Frog Dreaming, I'm not sure where it went. Here it is. This is a down and dirty copy of it from Lulu. It doesn't have a publisher yet. I'm not worried about that. It will find. Frog hops around. That's Frog's job. He hops all around. He'll find the right publisher. It's being translated right now into 6 different languages, all the way from Lithuanian to Hebrew to Japanese, French, German. Just because people who've seen it have asked if they could translate it. The woman who's translating it into Hebrew says, I have a friend who can translate it into Arabic. And Melinda suggested maybe it'd be good to do a version of Frog Dreaming at some point where they all speak different languages. And Froggy speaks Hebrew, and his best friend Lizzie speaks Arabic. And I've never seen a book like that. I think it's a great idea, especially at this time. And they all understand each other. I find that the old myths, as I've worked on these, on this book in particular. By the way, this is Icarus. And you know what happens to Icarus because he's young and dumb. Well, the young people I know are anything but dumb. They're creative, they're brilliant. So my Icarus becomes a guide. He never falls. He doesn't fly too close to the sun. He knows the difference. And I really do believe that too many of the ancient stories are punishing. The Garden of Eden, women are demonized. The snake, nature is demonized. We're thrown out of the garden. We live in the garden. And I think these stories have to come spontaneously, not as a torch and a crying out, but really much more spontaneously, like this sneaked up on us. And I'm so fortunate now that Caleb, who's 28, about 4 years ago, I introduced the story to him when he was 12, and about 4 years ago, he said, gee, Ma, I think I can help you with this. And he has. So there's one kind of collaboration. Now the second video will show you another collaboration. I was visiting my son Robert in Silicon Valley, and he has an 11-year-old, Chong Chong, who is just masterful at the computer. And again, intergenerational. Chong Chong said, "Grandma, can I do a YouTube channel for you and move all your TikToks? I'm a TikTok star. It's bizarre." It's
How many TikTok views?
7 million views. Talking about art. Caleb had said to me when he saw a piece that's going to become the centerpiece of my book, "Where does art come from? Making breath visible." Caleb was a card magician for 15 years, so he knows how to edit perfectly. And he did a series of TikToks. He said, "Can we do some TikToks, Jima?" I said, "Whatever, you don't say no to a grandchild, never." I said, "Whatever you want, honey." So he didn't tell me he was building up to this particular TikTok. So I ended up with 100,000 followers and 7 million views. Talking about an incredible piece of art that a 10-year-old had done. I suggest you look at it. It's called Jima Judy, and it's Anna's doll. It really is an astounding work of art. So my 11-year-old grandson, Chong Chong, 5 minutes later shows me the YouTube channel, and he's moved all the TikToks over to it. It would take me 5 years to do something like that. So I was thinking about frog dreaming. A friend who had did a brilliant book, Your Brain on Art, introduced frog dreaming to her editor and said, "Would you be interested in publishing this? This is Random House." And he said, "It's interesting, but it doesn't have a particular audience." Well, that's the point of the book. It's totally it started out as a children's book for a character in a novel that my husband and I are writing. And it's now become intergenerational, no age. I think that's really, really important. So I thought, well, I'm not going to bother looking for a publisher. It will happen or it won't. And after Chong Chong set up the YouTube channel, about 2 months later, I was thinking, gosh, it would be fun to do a recording of Frog Dreaming and to bring the songs in it to life. So I called my friend Judge Reinhold, who used to live next door, who's a wonderful comic actor and actor. And he came out with his family from where he lives now. And Caleb came down, and my friend Lorraine, who is a sound healer, who was very important in my healing, long Western medicine, as well as all the complementary medicines that Santa Fe can offer, and Galisteo. She asked Zevi and Kelsey, wonderful musicians, and we gathered together. And this is what happened.
Bringing everyone together this week was to enter Froggy back into process in a new way. We didn't know what that looked like, and Jima brought in this term laboratory, because a laboratory, the end goal is experimentation and discovery.
I thought, why not just do a wonderful reading with friends who are also talented and with music and see what comes out of it.
Long, long ago, Frog dreams he sings as he swims.
And I don't know that it was clear what the picture was, but there was a feeling of magic and a feeling of expansiveness and inclusion that meant that anybody brought into the project could make it special and could make it better.
Because of Judy intentionally wanting us not to know how we were going to pull this off, it was more reassuring to know that we had people that were very capable. And when you're in a room of talented people, things can really happen creatively because you trust each other.
I was a math and science kid, and I love the fact and the reality that energies and interconnectedness play an important and under-identified role in the things that we do in life. And we made something that would not have been made if we'd had an explicit vision going into it. And we started with the read through, and then we started incorporating music, and it all just kind of built on itself to get to this point of like, okay, let's record these tracks.
And it can start with the words versus the music. This feels like a song that should start with the music.
You know, it took a while to find the footing. I had no idea if it was even going to work. It starts out, everybody's kind of very tentative. But to see everybody step into kind of a freedom to improvise, to feel confident enough to go for it and put themselves out in ways that were completely unknown, you know, and feeling how the music could tie it together.
Music is an absolutely integral part of the story. The whole arc of the story is about finding one's heart song.
My heart sings, just totally, and then my heart whispers.
Froggy's heart song is one of the oldest parts of the book, and we did not change a single page of that throughout the entire process. So those words have been in me, and they're inextricably tied to the images.
My heart sings. My heart.
So taking this leap in supplementing with the words with music rather than image, which is so natural for a heart song, we knew that was going to have to happen, was kind of terrifying. And there's a leap of faith in that.
My heart sings. My heart whispers. My heart smiles. My heart drums.
When the heart song was coming out of me, I just felt these descending layers of release.
My heart sings. My heart whispers. My heart smiles. And my heart drums. My heart sings. My heart listens. My heart smiles. My heart weeps.
There's something so vulnerable in letting your voice out like that. But just feeling, oh, I'm doing this. It's time. Like, it's time to release this. Everyone's here to catch me. It was profound.
My heart like makes a rainbow circle, and I sleep in the circle of my heart, and dreaming I go round, and dreaming I go round, and dreaming I go round and around and around in the round in the light.
I think that was the beauty of the entire process, was just everyone being so in the moment and together. You know, when it's a collaboration, when it's a group organism, some kind of unknown factor or magic takes over.
That resonated so deeply with me in that space. And that just being in that room with people who were inspiring, sweet, creative, open, that I could really let my talents shine with the hope that everybody else would do the same. And I think that's what a heart song is finding that shine, finding that space that you can be you, whatever that is. And stirring all of these things together, all of these ages together, and all of these skills together, and then weaving all of that wisdom. It's what we need a lot more of right now. We're meant to be in conversation and in connection.
It's unknown where Froggy's going to go, and it doesn't even matter, you know, in the sense of the process and the relationships and how each person gets to grow in their own way. It is really what this is about.
Thank you. I think that it's about connection. And what Caleb said about knowing that someone's there to catch you, that we all catch each other. So if Chong Chong hadn't set up that YouTube channel, I would never thought of doing this. Again, connection, all different. Our ages ran from 12 to 84. And we worked together like pure magic. No egos in the room at all. Simply, how do we tell this story in the most beautiful way? So thank you.
See what I mean? Come on, panel. Come on back. Are you feeling the love? I mean, that's exactly what we're doing here. And when I talked to Judy about being a presenter, I had seen this. I had no idea it was going to tie into this as beautifully as it just did. But if there was like an anthem for what I'm trying to accomplish here, what we're trying to accomplish with Collaboration Lab, that's it. That's exactly it. The mystery, the magic. Come sit. Come sit.
I'll stand.
And so, yeah, it being a collaboration lab, we don't know what's going to happen. We're just letting the magic unfold. And in keeping with what I promised to do, I did collect a couple of questions from members of the audience. And it's hard to segue from that because I almost wanted to end it with that because that just kind of keeps the energy so elevated. But one of the things that we were talking about right before we broke was bringing in the financial connection, and we also started to talk, Pamela and I, after the break, about yes, we need this conversation to happen among all of us creatives and our creative community because half of us don't even know each other. We don't know we exist. And so how can we solve the problems that we're facing as a community if we don't even know what all the pieces are? So what is the end game? Well, we don't know until we know where we're even starting. So part of the project here is to figure out where are we, who are we, and what do we need? And one of the things that Pamela and I were talking about was the need to bring in maybe people outside of the arts community, because it's not just about the arts at the end of the day. It's about the impact that we're having on the entire community, and who are we serving. And we're really serving all of us. And so maybe the conversation needs to happen outside of just the arts community. It needs to happen outside of our geographic community, out of our financial community. And I've been pondering this concept of sort of yin-yang economics. And what does that even mean? And what does it look like? And I think that when we talk about young and the financial component of how do we get ourselves out of this pickle that we're in, where we've gotten very dependent on a small number of people who have the wherewithal to support the arts, who think that it matters, who thinks that it makes a difference. How do we broaden the conversation? And so I want to open it up a little bit more, have our panelists talk about different possible solutions. But first, when we talk about solutions, one of the questions that came in that I thought was so great was, how are you currently using data analytics for impact reporting, funding, or coordination? And this is one of the key issues, I think, that happens, because here we are doing all these things that are so qualitative in our communities. And then when it comes to figuring out how to make it sustainable, we have to use these quantifiable metrics. And so how do we do that? And one of the things I was planning to do at the beginning of this was to have everybody sort of take a second to measure where they felt on the optimism scale in terms of where we are in the world right now. And then this would be a good time to measure where we are now on the optimism scale, because we just had that incredible presentation. But that's a metric, right? But is it quantifiable? Is it enough to make 3M want to give us money for a project? How do we bridge that divide? How do we make that communication happen? So with that in mind, I want to turn it over back to the panelists and mine this brain trust we have here. You want to start? No. Yeah, Judy.
I'm just curious, because Melinda and I were talking about how do we get funding to put the video together, the full video. And I said, I'm not gonna play the game. I'm not gonna say who the audience is, because I don't know. Why is it being translated into Hebrew? I didn't ask anyone to do that. And it was this feeling like we have to think differently about this. It's not so much looking for the solution and having to prove, like having to write 100 pages to a publishing house. I'm very lucky I get to work with Radius on my books. But Frog Dreaming, I want to go out into the world in a different way. But I'm not willing to write 100 pages to prove that I'm a TikTok whatever, or that I'm this, or that it's going to reach this audience, and therefore you should publish it. There's got to be another way.
I just want to agree
by
with
touching
you.
people's hearts, maybe. I mean, if we had another hour, I'd have you all work towards your heart song. And maybe if we do that, and if we know our own heart song, then there's a way that life actually helps us move along without our having to figure it out all the time.
Yeah, you're exactly on to the kernel that we all need. I spent a month writing a grant proposal that I was asked to do by the city. They were like, we think that this would be a great thing for you to apply for, and do it. And so I did. And the grant proposal was for the state. So the city actually had no say in that whatsoever. And the state received it, and they went, where are the metrics? Where and so I looked at what it would take to get metrics on what we were trying to do. What we were talking about at that time was Art Week, multiple locations and multiple events over multiple days. The state hated that idea because it's hard to quantify. And when I got on the phone with a statistician, someone who could track who came, where they went, what they did, it was $10,000 for a very base course version of metrics. And the grant would have been $10,000. So there's nothing in it, right? Except the heart and the kernel, and we have to move from there forward.
But you can get, I hate to say it.
Please say it. This is the place.
AI. So I have an example at my office because we're involved in a big project that was going to cost a lot of money, and we interviewed about 6 people, and one of my colleagues, who's 10 years younger and savvier at this, said, well, that's what AI can do. And I said, well, how? And she said, well, basically, you have to be smart about, there's data sources out there. So there's data that knows how many people come to Art Week, and there's data that says how many people, the demographics of New Mexico and where the money is, and you actually can put that into AI and say, here are all these data sources, I need you to analyze it and create either a psychographic model, here's how we need to advertise to people, here's how many people would pay attention. I mean, I'm not a big, there's a lot about AI that is, we can all agree, that's not attractive, but it's an amazing tool for compiling enormous amounts of data and finding relations. And ChatGPT is like $20 a year. So it can help. And data, when in this business that we're in, which I was talking about, that's transactional, you have to have numbers. You have to show why you're doing matters, and in the world where money comes from, transactions matter, data matters. So it is about the heart, but you have to figure out how to communicate the heart message in a way that speaks to capitalism, which we so far haven't gotten rid of. But there's a way to do it in a really smart way. I mean, I've got some ideas for you.
Now, the city of Albuquerque just completed a major public art census. They worked with a company called Roke out of Indianapolis, and got volunteers, got people driving around their cars. They went from the west part of the city to the east part of the city, past Bernalillo County, south down to almost Las Cruces. And what they found is that people have different ideas about art, and so they were able to collect all this data. Are they ofrendas on the side of the road? Yes, that's public art. Did you paint on the side of your garage? Yes, that's public art. So they have all this data. It's fantastic, and it's great. And I'm really glad that they're able to do it, because it does quantify and show what is happening in the county and in the city. However, the biggest thing that I see, I owned an art gallery around 2000, and the city of Albuquerque has an art gallery that we all share a responsibility for. But I have watched people come to the door, step in, and leap backwards out the gallery, and then look and hold their chest and go, can I come in here? There is a fear of art. We want it in our lives. We need it in our lives. We expect to see it in our daily lives, but we have an innate fear of it because people are afraid that they don't count in it. They don't matter in it. And the people who are working in it are others. So that's the first hurdle, is to get past the fear of who we are. Art is in all of us. It's everything. Public art is in everything. You have to, first of all, convince people to stop the fear that they have of what's inside of them. And that's where we are as a country right now. Stop the fear inside of them and embrace it, and then go out and explore it. And your definition of what art is, and you bring it back to the table in order for us to have a much more pollinated picture of what art is and how all of us have a part in it.
Jamie, no.
I just want to agree with that. I think that goes back to art as a capital A, and engendering this kind of feeling of imposter syndrome or not enoughness that many people might feel. And I do agree that data is important. However, I think it can be a very blunt instrument and not wielded very properly or helpfully many times. And one example, and it's sort of like you have to have a hypothesis. You have to be a scientist. You have to have a hypothesis of what you think you're getting at so that you can get the data that you think you need. So like when we worked, for over 10 years rehabilitating that historic core of Okiwenge Pueblo, we could never have said, let's count how many dancers there are at feast day. But in fact, that project helped the community understand that their pueblo is alive, has always been alive, will always be alive, and showing up again, more so. You could never predict that. There's no hypothesis that we could have had to sort of have that metric, which is probably the most important metric for the entire pueblo, right? And so there's always issues with that. And what I loved about the public engagement work that we did with UNM is that you have these brilliant students, grad students, and faculty who have the ethical principles of research and ways to really analyze subjective data and put that forward in a way that there's a framework for and a methodology, which I think we all need to better understand, because that's really where I think we're all coming from, and it really celebrates the sort of oral tradition of how we understand the world, and it helps us then gear the quality of life questions that we're all really getting toward with the work we're doing. And the last thing this makes me think of is that if there is, and I'm not sure there is, but if there is a silver lining to the way that the world is blowing up right now, it would be for all of us in our local spheres of community to see that we can no longer outsource community need, right? And really understand who our neighbors are, who their children are, and so on and so forth. And we cannot assume that someone else is going to come and pick up those pieces. And that, I think, is what I'm starting to really feel. Thank God it's a small town in many ways, because we can see that a little more clearly, perhaps. But I think there is something there that we could really grab onto.
That's great. There are 2 points I want to make. This is really useful. First, on the TikTok thing, I have like 12,000 comments by people. And the comments are, I wish I had been allowed to do art that way when I was in school. Over and over and over again. Those are the comments in different ways. Secondly, back in the 1980s, in the small town of Healdsburg in Northern California, we had big art programs. And we had a poet write, fill out everything. Poets know more. Lee Perrin is his name. And Lee knew more about budgets than anybody, because he was a poet. He wasn't going to make any money. He had to live very, very carefully. But he also knew how to choose words well. But we also believed so deeply in the programs. So this was 1980 to 1982. We got $250,000 from the state of California. We paid artists to come into the classrooms $60 an hour. 1980. Because we valued what they could give to the teachers. The teacher would sit down in the classroom, the artist would teach. It was an incredible program. And again, we were so passionate about it that we found the ways to make it happen. And I think that passion is, and what I experienced from each one of you is the passion that you have. It's the passion of artists.
Well, it's one of the main reasons I wanted to bring all of these people together, because over the course of these 4 sessions, we will have representatives we will have poets, we will have dancers, we will have musicians, we will have people from all different quadrants, or not quadrants, but sectors of the arts community. And we need to bring this group of people together to figure out what's going on. And then we need to take it out, as we were saying, to the larger community at large. I mean, one of the initiatives, I think, if Kristen's in the room, that she initiated because she was an outdoorsy person. We are doing Ride Your Bike to the Movies initiative. But I mean, just something as simple as that, which is such a creative way to bring people that wouldn't normally think of themselves as being arts. They're sort of the athletes of the group instead of the artists of the group. But that cross-pollination is so key. And these ideas will get sparked in these types of conversations. And so these kind of, I don't know how we do this. This was just an idea that I had, just like to throw as much spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. But I think over the course of these 4 sessions, we will see what kind of surfaces, and then we can take action on that. And then we decide we reconvene again this time next year, or whatever it is that we do. So that's sort of the hope. I'm trying to think if there should be, we've got plenty of time. Let's go. One of the other questions that came from the audience was, what is the desired outcome of this forum? I think I sort of just addressed that a little bit. And is there a tangible goal? And will there be a committee to help facilitate? So I think that's a great question, and it speaks to part of what I love that you're presencing, Judy, is the fact that part of this, we're so accustomed to having a goal and doing a very linear process toward it, and this is not taking that question in any way, but I think we have to be brave enough to not know what the outcome is. And I think we have to be bold enough to figure out, you know, I think we've all been doing this long enough to know that the unexpected outcomes, and that's what I think I'll ask you all to speak to, are what are some examples of some unexpected outcomes that you have had along the way that you never would have possibly been able to put into a grant plan or anything like that. You know, it's just like something that came out of nowhere. I know you have some.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead and start at the end.
I can't think of an example right now, but I guess in some ways, I would go back to the Zozobra program that we did with the Kiwanis as a collaboration, because Zozobra started as a tradition by 5 artists who made this effigy and burned it in their backyard, you know, Will Schuster and his compatriots. And it's a 100-year-old tradition. Last year was the 100th celebration. And the Kiwanis were like, well, we've made these effigies out of fiberglass, and now we have them in our storage space, and we don't know what to do with them. And I was like, well, I think I have an idea. Let's get artists to customize each one. And you know, this is not an original idea. They have these in many cities and so forth. But the thing that was unique and unexpected about the Zozobra thing is that Zozobra has a life of its own and a very deep following in our community. And it's not the fine art community at all. And so when we had that exhibit where all the Zozobras came together at the convention center last July, I can't tell you how many times I was brought to tears by the community coming in, because they were able to come in for free. And it was people that had never been to an art show. There were people who were there to see the one that was kind of the lowrider one that was painted with car paint. There were people who were just absolute Zozobra fanatics, and then there were extremely capital A art connoisseurs, collectors, and artists. So it was incredibly satisfying to have a very unexpected outcome.
And parenthetically, my bank had one of the little Zozobras, and
Which was
I walked
covered in gold. That was $800
yes.
worth of gold.
It was the absolute pride and joy of every banker in that bank. Every time I would go in, they would say, because they knew I was artsy person, and they'd be like, oh, Leela, you've got to come see our Zozobra. It's just, we are so proud of it. And you know, they were so excited to see where it was going to end up. And that's the kind of buy-in that, Robyne, you're talking about, where you don't have the experience of, you know, leaping back out of the door because you feel like it's not for you. And another person that I interviewed, Bobby Beals, just recently, has done a lot with the skating community, skateboard community, and that's been another entry point. And you know, he's got initiated programs where he's giving blank skateboards to kids to paint, so they you know, make it theirs.
It's not my project, but I think the project that was happening between the soccer club And Meow Wolf is a great example of what happens in the community when people start to appreciate cross sports, cross arts. They were able to bring local artists, local illustrators that people knew in the community who did lowbrow art. I hate that term, but lowbrow art, rock posters, posters for different bands that were coming to town. And they're able to ask those illustrators to create posters that best reflected New Mexico. Nothing about the teams unless they wanted to about the teams, but it was really about New Mexico. And everybody had such a different interpretation of what New Mexico meant to them. And reproducing that at soccer games, football games, soccer games, really brought in a new audience for them, people who collected the whole series throughout the year, very proud of the fact that they had all of them. And it's just taking some kind of thought about reaching into a new audience. Now you're creating a new audience for art, you're creating a new audience for soccer. It cross-pollinates. People don't feel like they're threatened by highbrow art. It's art that they can connect with, that they appreciate it. It's in other forms and walks of their life, so they feel comfortable with it. So yeah, it's those cross-collaborations and those ideas that we've never seen before. What we were talking about earlier in terms of people who they're not your traditional art audience. So it's trying to think along those lines as to who else can we reach? What picadillos they might have about art. How can we solve that by just making this collaboration and bring them into a new fold?
Okay, I have two things. One, I want to say, it just occurred to me that what we want to cultivate actually is heart audience, not more art audience. It's not about that, right? And the other thing I wanted to say, and Judy, this is something that you spark, is my memories of the very first time I was in Venice Beach, California. And maybe it's the ocean, and we don't have that. But there were moms with kids in strollers, there were people roller skating, there were people of all ages, every ethnicity, and Sunday afternoon at Venice Beach was my jam. I mean, that is just where I wanted to live. That's where I wanted to be, because that intergenerational piece is so important. It's so important that children are exposed to people that are not their same grade. We just need to cultivate that.
I want to go back to, Robyne, what you said about trust earlier, and I think that what's been remarkable, I think, and this started during COVID, is foundations and philanthropy really starting to trust organizations and people, and I will say that some of the worst projects I probably have ever done have been great grant applications. And instead, I think what's important is trusting the process, whether it's collaborative, the creative process, whatever that is, really, it's about the people and the relationships between people, the heart around it, that we all need to learn to trust more than the data, because that's where those unexpected outcomes can really show and can really shine. And it's kind of interesting. I'm now starting to see parallels between a lot of the emergency response that happened in the pandemic and what's happening now. And I'm very curious where it's going to go, because I think that when we saw that happening during the pandemic, we all thought, oh, it is possible, right? It was like, oh, resources can shift in these really interesting ways, and trust can start to be built that's reciprocated. So who knows? Who knows where that's going now?
So one of the things that we did in Healdsburg when I was helping to run programs and participating in them is we started a spaghetti dinner to raise funds. We didn't have decent playgrounds at the schools, and we wanted to raise the money. So the first time we did it, my friend Karen Tappan and I put it together, and that was the training in high school that I got. So lucky. 900 people came. We were stunned. We were finding as many cans of tomato sauce as we could find to keep extending the sauce, keep extending the sauce. 20 years later, 5,000 people. It was a town of 6,000. Incredible community building, and the money went towards the arts. Once we got the playgrounds, then the money went to the arts. And everybody was involved. They had to have special buses. It ended up being up at Villa Chanticleer, and they'd just have special buses so that everybody wouldn't come at once. And that was very powerful and really worked. And I've always thought everybody can do art. It's a natural expression, but not everybody has to be an artist. I didn't have a choice. When it hit me, there was no turning back. It was like breathing.
I think it is for everybody. We just haven't figured out. And most of us aren't breathing.
Are still holding it.
Yeah.
Well, it was really interesting. I did interviews of guards back in the 1990s. I was really interested in the guards because they spent so much time with the art. So I went to the National Gallery and I got permission and I interviewed the guards. I went to the Phillips Collection and interviewed the guards. The guards at the National Gallery were mainly ex-servicemen, inner city guys, mainly black. And many of them had not experienced art before. And I asked them, what is your favorite work here? Why is it? And they all felt so strongly about it. The head guard, Yamashita Johnson, I said, how'd you get a name like that? He said, my mom said Johnson was such a common name that he named my Hiawatha Yamashita, and so everybody would know who we actually were. He said, when I go on vacation, I go to museums now. I mean, it was really important to them. The Philadelphia Art Museum, it was fascinating. I went to the Cy Twombly exhibit, 50 Days at Ilium, and I think this makes a point about how one enters art. And the guard there said, I hate guarding this room. And he said, all the guards hate guarding it. I said, why? And he said, they think the artist is making fun of them. You know, these 8 by 8 foot canvases with a couple of marks on them. People pull out knives. They pull out pencils. They try to mark the you have to watch everyone every second. And I was thinking how separate they must feel, or that something needed. When I had talked to the head person at the Philadelphia, I got in because one of our neighbors in California was on, well, he was CEO SmithKline Beecham. So guess what? You got a connection. But the head curator said, I don't know why you want to interview the guards. They don't think about anything. And I said, I beg to differ, sir. My experience has been quite different than that. They are the ones, they spend more time than you do with the art. And there's so many ways. I mean, at some point, I'll publish some of those interviews. People can really identify with it. It's how do we help everybody between spaghetti dinners, guards at museums, really respecting how art can bring us together. And we didn't run out of sauce when there were 5,000.
This is sort of in line with what Jamie was talking about when you brought all those disparate groups in and they had to be transparent about their agendas. The thing about artists is they don't see obstacles as a reason to stop. They figure out how to go around it, how to work with it, how to use it. And what I'm sitting here thinking is, you know, we have this big problem in our city with housing and homelessness. Why don't we bring, I mean, a group of people together that think about problems in a different way? They don't really see them as problems. It's more like, okay, well, I have three colors I'm going to paint with, black, red, and white, and I don't really have canvases. I've got paper, and I've got these people I want to work with. How do we make something happen? I mean, to me, that's where the capital of A of art, or the little a, I don't know, it can be inclusive to use the artist's way of thinking about solving problems to address some issues that are outside of art that are at the root of community.
I want to piggyback on what you said, and I want to piggyback on what you said. So I was part of a project after the riots downtown. Well, downtown had its own issue. The whole business model of working downtown was starting to die 10 years before George Floyd happened. Most people don't even want to admit that. But the model was dying because people were working from home. They were doing tiered working. Somebody had a baby, somebody, you know, all these different things. So the model was dying anyway for downtown businesses. But during COVID and then George Floyd, downtowns died. And it's everywhere. It's not just what happened in Minneapolis, but because I focus on that, they're desperate because many of the Fortune 500 companies left downtown. They're moving to the suburbs. There was nothing was filling up the downtown structure. And normally what happens in a business model is that businesses will leave downtown for a period, they wait till the prices drop, and then they move back in. They weren't coming back. And so they have all these empty businesses, all these empty storefronts. I worked with the Urban Land Institute, and so they brought in people who were creatives. They brought in architects, they brought in designers, they brought in artists and art consultants to try to look at downtown in a different way. Now, artists look at things differently. The McKnight Foundation did a study that proves that most businesses, most Fortune 500 companies want artists to consult with them because artists think outside the box. They can work with different groups of people that most people don't work with. They have a different way of approaching it. And so what I saw during COVID is that because artists didn't have the money, or the venues to go into to even do their art, they took their grant money and reinvested it in the community. So what they started doing was going to these empty storefronts and creating projects, starting yoga classes, cooking for senior citizens on Sunday. They did a million different things that the city finally latched on once they realized these businesses were not coming back downtown. And so now they release city funding to help artists start a storefront with the landlords, give the artists a reduced rent for a 3-year period, and then if the artist is able to maintain it, let them have that space in order to bring people back downtown and make it an entertainment center. And then employed some of the folks that were the anchors of downtown, Target Center, the Minnesota Timberwolves, to keep the doors and lights open at night so that when their venues let out, they could go to the art stores that are open. Clothing designers that were in the community in small pockets in different communities, Camden, near North, neighborhoods that were predominantly African American, but also had small businesses that were really starting to generate because of COVID. People were really starting to stay in their communities. They invited those people to come downtown. Target started giving contracts out to young entrepreneurs. So you're starting to see a revitalization, in part because they're starting to recognize the importance of artists in contributing to the new ideology of how downtown centers should be run, how artists can be best utilized, and how to reinvest in your artists in the community.
That's great, and I think Rashawn at Vital Spaces is cultivating a similar type of program for us here in Santa Fe. I really wanted to have him here. Unfortunately, he was tied up on Wednesday, so he couldn't make it for any of this. But for those of you who don't know Vital Spaces, I encourage you to look up what their initiative is because it's very much in alignment with what you're describing. Ben, before we, I also am thinking here, because we've been talking a lot about sort of at-risk community, we've been talking about corporations, but I think one of the untapped resources and one of the most needy segments of our culture is like middle class, regular Joe people who aren't necessarily, they're at risk, their health is at risk because they've turned into automatons and they're not even engaging, and they could. And so how do we tap those people, the people who are coming home from a decent paying job and scrolling on the internet instead of engaging in their creative capacities? Any thoughts on that?
Spaghetti?
Yeah, you know, when you're talking about how artists think differently, we think in terms of process. We're stuck with that. I go into my studio, I have an idea how I'm gonna work on a canvas. The canvas just says, oh yeah? That's what you think. I have a voice too. And that's the different thinking. And I think actually getting people involved with their hands. We forget, Immanuel Kant said, these are the visible parts of our brain. These. That opposable thumb has made all the difference. How do we connect people back with their hands? And I think giving workshops, doing all kinds of things like that, really inviting people to use their hands and the excitement. I have an exercise I do with clay where it came out of a painting that I did where I did 100 paintings on a single canvas, knowing I was trying to teach myself how to paint. You know, I've had to teach myself to be an artist. I didn't go to art school. And again, I find I'm very, thank goodness, I studied English literature, so I know how to write. I was very fortunate that way. But in teaching myself, and I have a teaching degree, so I could teach myself how to become an artist. And process is everything. And how to get people to relax, not have to have a goal. And every time I allow process to be the master, something magical happens.
And so say more about the clay exercise.
The clay exercise is simply taking, and you might want to try this, real clay, not plasticine. It has to be geological time that you're holding in your hands. You take some clay and maybe think about your heart song. Think of about an image that might live in your heart and make that image. And write it down on a piece of paper and then let another image form. Collaborate with the clay. And then let another image form. And each time, just write down what the image is. Back in the day, we always made ashtrays for our parents. Nobody would do that anymore in school. But just let it keep changing. Don't judge it. Let it become, let it become, let it become. And when you're done with that, and usually people, I could leave them in my studio for 6 hours and come back. But let's say after half an hour or an hour, you have a big list of words. Take the words and make a story out of it and see what story evolves with language. It's an incredible exercise. And I used to teach teachers how to do this, and I said, if you did this every morning in the classroom, for 10 minutes even, you'd have a different kid on your hands because they would be inside themselves. And it's so, what's amazing, the stories, everybody says, I never thought I could write something like that. And that's to your saying that everybody is an artist and each person has their own expression. And it's magical how these words allow a process to develop. And I think doing that in a corporate situation or any situation would help people find other ways of thinking about what they have to do to achieve what they finally want to achieve without having to work directly towards achieving it.
I'd like to offer that in our little ArtBridge group, one of the things that we've created is something called the Creativity Toolkit. And it's a blog post that Mia, our wonderful Mia, and Lindsay are both contributing to. And it's an invitation, almost like morning pages. But it's an invitation, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, take a moment out of your day and engage in this particular practice. And we're getting such great feedback. We're mostly posting it on LinkedIn and Substack, but we also have some, rollover into social media. So if you see it, pay attention, because these are great little exercises. It's called the Creativity Toolkit.
And where do you find it?
On Substack. That's my advertisement. But you were going to say something, Jane. Yeah, I'll post it after. We'll give you some URLs that you can check at the end of the evening.
I was just going to add to what you were saying. I think that we are poorer as a society in that we're not investing in vocational schools anymore. And the dignity of work and the skills and expertise of knowing how to build something or how something works, that is a creative endeavor. It's brilliant, right? And I think that if we could find more ways to make those connections, as you say, to sort of the every man, every woman, perhaps who doesn't, feel comfortable walking into an art gallery, but has something gigantically beautiful to share in terms of what their world is and what their everyday work is. That I think it wouldn't be lovely to bring more of that dignity, more of that respect back to the work. One thing we did at the Art Institute is I developed a fellowship program that would connect emerging artists with city staff. And so the idea was that artists could sort of infiltrate these city departments and bring their artistic thinking. And city departments could also say, hey, here's how the city works, because as much as we might want to talk about the city not doing this or not doing that, city staff are amazing and true public servants, right? And very proud of their work. And so that was a very interesting process, to really see how they were working. And we would bring together, they were working with 5 different departments at the city. We would bring them together every so often, the artists and the city staff said, this is the first time I've even been in a conversation with anyone from that department. And all of the work they were doing had so many layers of interlapping and connectivity, right? But it was the artists who brought that together. So I think that there's so much more that can be done with that.
Can you say a little bit more about what is going to be happening at MATA in terms of opportunities for, I call them civilians, lay folk, to get involved in the arts? I mean, what's going to be there?
Yes, we have 10 organizations that are planning to co-locate at least either fully or partially or bring some programming, and those are already doing amazing work in the community. So, folks like Girls Inc. and Vital Spaces, YouthWorks, who does amazing programs, they are going to bring a youth-run cafe with their culinary arts program.
They catered our event tonight,
I was going to ask you because it was really good. And they're also going to bring their Youth Build program. We've got Make Santa Fe, so a maker space, and they're going to be able to double or triple what they can offer the community. And so really the focus is going to be on that intergenerational programming, making sure that there is a lot of opportunities for this to be feeling like a community cultural center, while it's also going to be offices for all of these organizations and facilities for making. And facilities for artist studios and art collectives to show up, and also spaces for adjacent, people. We all need accountants and lawyers for the arts as well. And so what we're really trying to do is help build or support an existing ecosystem in Santa Fe and provide the infrastructure so that wherever you are in your creative journey and whatever age you are, there's also like UNM continuing education programs that will be offered. You can have a place, whether you're a cultural entrepreneur, or whether you just want to show up and take a class, or whether you need to really learn how to enter the creative economy. So, yeah, there's a lot of cool things.
So we're getting close to time, believe it or not, and I want to make sure that we talk about some real specifics. The key issues that you're facing now, the most threatening issues that you're facing as organizations or whatever your trajectory is, so that we can kind of put them into the pot and see how we can cook up some solutions. Because if we're just trying to establish what do we most need to address in each of our organizations? Besides money. I mean, obviously it's a money thing, but a little deeper than that.
I work with a group, and it's now in its 30th year through the University of Minnesota. It is a world conference on remedies to racial and social inequities. And so there are delegates from all over the planet and people from all over the U.S. And one of the most interesting things that I heard was the educators down in Florida with all of Ron DeSantis's anti-DEI policies, and we're seeing so many people capitulate to these things. The University of Florida Gainesville educators decided to do something that I thought was radical and really important, and they just decentralized education in their curriculum. They took their curriculum out of the university structure so they didn't have to kowtow to DeSantis' DEI policies and face termination and face having their licenses taken away. And they put it back in the community to work with elders in the arts so that elders are telling their history. They're not telling a DEI story. And they also put it online, and you're starting to see that with TikTok and a lot of other places where you see Hillman University, which was made up from one of the old Cosby Show stories, shows A Different World with Lisa Bonet. They named it after Hillman University because they decided to take African American education courses and put them online, therefore not having a government hand in education. I think that's one of the most radical and one of the most important things that we can do is give power back to the community and the people who have lived that experience and have that experience and ongoing, those middle of the road, middle class, mainstream people who might have a little fear and dread and still trying to figure out what they want to do can do it privately and learn. The other thing I want to say is that we have incredible park systems throughout the United States. And at least 75% of people live a 10-minute walk from a park. If we can't get people out to a park to interact with each other, because many of the community centers and parks were established for that reason. Parks were originally created for rich people to get out and socialize. Forward-thinking people made parks for the public, but also added an opportunity for them to have a meeting place where they could come and ideate together. We have to bring people back to the parks. We have to get people to get re-involved in their communities and realize they're just as important a part of communities as the established institutions. Is it socialist? Hell yeah. And I think it's really important that we realize that we are the masters of our own fate. No one else is going to have the solution for us but us. We all have to be subversive links in the subversive cogs in the machine to disrupt, restart, and replant the seeds in people to really be active in their communities. I'm from political people.
And I think that one of the ways to do that is to not succumb to overwhelm. And I think that was going to be what I said. Besides money, this sense of constant overwhelm. And I think that we all feel like it's critical, obviously it is, to like keep up with national and international news, but I would argue that it is more critical to know what is going on in our community and not feel this constant sense of overwhelm over things we don't necessarily have control over, and to learn about the ways that we can. Someone talked about using our hands, like what can we really put our hands on, and so that can help really provide a sense of direction, because what I'm seeing right now is with that overwhelm is this real sense of like, there's so many things going wrong. Where do we actually head? Yeah.
That's the biggest act of resistance.
Say it again, Judy.
I just said the biggest act of resistance is to actually turn to your community and begin to fix it. We can't get too deep into politics, but that could be the positive side, because of Trump basically destroying the safety net, now it's up to us to build it.
It is up to us, and I think it's not a movement. I think there's so many artists that I know who are connecting within the community everywhere, but not as a movement, not like this, but like this. And it's powerful, and I think it's incredibly subversive in the best way, and it will create a wave that will help in many ways. I want to quickly mention, I had a show here at CCA in 2019, before COVID hit, actually. And it was called The Dream Life of Objects. And we had a table set up where people could leave something, where they could take something that I had Xeroxed and then leave a story about an object that had helped dream their life. We ended up with 600 unbelievably perfect stories. I'm a fierce editor working on the novel. My husband calls me Miss Slash and Burn, okay? I can't change a single word on any one of them because people were speaking from their hearts. And at some point, Melinda and I might end up doing a podcast of those 600. They are so powerful. They're about death, they're about life, they're about everything that we're talking about. And they would connect people at such a deep level. People would send in, if we did a podcast, people would write their own stories about an object that dreamed them. And so we have such an object-based society, so materialistic in a sense. This was the opposite of that. It was how an object helped dream who they were.
It's also beautiful. And what would be an obstacle? I mean, what stands in the way of you doing that starting tomorrow? I'm just curious. I mean, not that you need another project at the moment, but
That's the problem.
that's the problem.
But
Yeah.
also, both
Yeah.
with both Melinda and my work. But I have them sitting there in the studio in clear view so that we can sit down. And
But I mean, I just think of all these people that come home from work and they have nothing to do. And if we could figure out a way
they would
to
find it.
employ them, not, paying them, but to engage them in projects like this, just think about the quality of life that would be enhanced for everybody.
Oh,
I mean,
thi-
these are the kind of mobilization concepts that I'm hoping will somehow come out of this. I don't know what it's going to look like, but mobilizing our community to get engaged with projects like this. And how many times have we fantasized about, oh, if only the artists were running the world? Well, we can do that. We can.
Well, we can help connect people, I think. I don't know about running the world.
It would be disastrous and fabulous all at the same time.
I'm not as sure.
How about once a week on KUNM?
That's an idea.
Like
Yeah.
Story hour.
Yeah, story
You know,
hour.
20 minutes. We'll read you 3 stories, and then it becomes something everybody goes,
It'd be
"Did you hear
wonderful.
that?" So
Because
remember how NPR used to have that program on Fridays where they put 2 people in a sound booth? And they
Yes.
talked about either how they fell in love or how they healed themselves. So you guys could just do it on, listen to us. So easy, just do it on UNM.
Well, we read through, you read through, and I filmed you reading through a number
Yes.
of them. So we have that. Yeah, I mean, it's just a time. Judy has 100 things she's juggling. I'm juggling a lot, but we sat down and just had her read through, I don't know, like 30 or 40 of them, just because I wanted to hear her voice reading them. Because Judy and Philip are going to be the best people you've ever had read you anything. But yeah, so I think it's just, I don't know, getting to sit with them and then figuring out what's the best avenue for sharing. You want people to hear them, share with them. We talked about trying to remotely call in the people that wrote the stories to hear them read back to them and what it feels like for them to sit with that again and revisit that time, I mean, they're just profound. Like, I'd love to have conversations with those people that read those stories and where that came from in them. I mean, it's endless. I mean, that's the thing, it's endless, so it's just figuring out. But it's all the materials there. Caleb talks about that. Judy has the well-stocked studio. When you have all the things and it's all there, I mean, we're all just mining from riches. It's all there. So just figuring out the avenue that reaches people in the way they need to be reached, I think. So
It's so interesting because you even did like 8, you sort of described 8 different broadcasts that we could do. I'd forgotten that, Melinda. And it would be so, it's incredibly connective because everybody's a storyteller. We're all storytellers. I mean, that's a major part of life, is telling stories. As each of us talked about our growing up, we're telling these stories, and they connect us so deeply.
And
yeah,
so
it would be very simple to do, actually, at this point. And one woman, I'd love to interview her in person. Her son came back. She wrote about her son coming back from the war. Was it Iraq? I'm trying to remember. I think it was Iraq. And he killed himself. And she ended up going to Fort Benning, I think. And it's all connected to a tattoo that he did. And working with all the soldiers and putting on a show of their tattoos. It was incredible. Just incredible concepts. So powerful. They would touch people deeply. They would act.
I think if you want to find ways to engage people, they need to see themselves. I've noticed over my life, looking at photo albums with people, like, they don't care about how many great pictures you have of the Coliseum or wherever you went or whatever mountain you climbed. They want to see themselves, and if they can't see themselves, then maybe you, because they love you. But they don't even want to see somebody else that you love, right? I mean, we're sort of myopic that way. So we need to engage people by reflecting them back to themselves. And I have a war story that I think I should share tonight. Boy, that was awkward. Please fix that in post. So when I was young, my family had Japanese exchange students come into our home. And I'll try and make this brief. One of our Japanese exchange students, his father had been in the Second World War and was a prisoner of war, captured by the Americans, and he was a doctor. And he was treated so well, if you can imagine, as a prisoner of war, that he took on this mantle, this mantra that said, I want to know more about those people. They're not, maybe they're the enemy, but at the end of the war, he was like, I need to engage with those people. They need to be not those people. My father was also in the Second World War, and we don't really know exactly why he was so infatuated with Japan, but, you know, I think it was the women. And so, honestly. And so when we had these students into our home, he was wanting to reconnect in a certain way with that culture. And so we did. And when I was old enough, I was sent to Japan and met with that family, and now met the rest of the family. And then their daughter came to visit us when we had our daughter, who was a toddler. And now she's going to Japan. And so this family who encountered each other, not directly through the war, but through the war, have woven a connection through generations. And I think we need more of that.
Thank you. And that's it, folks. So what I want to end with is thank you all so much for coming and for your generous listening. This is a conversation that we're continuing next Wednesday with a whole new set of fabulous people. I hope you'll all choose to come again every Wednesday, 6 to 9. And then the most important group will be the 30th, July 30th, where we will convene all of the available panelists and all of you with your ideas to come together downstairs in the Waxman Gallery, and we're going to workshop this, and we're going to come up with where the rubber meets the road, as Dale said, how we actually turn these conversations into actionable items. So thank you again for coming. Take that little internal barometer, the metric, and see what your level of optimism is now compared to when you walked in the room. And if we've raised it by 1 degree, we got our job done here. So let's thank the panel.
Thank you.